timeline of plants begins about 500 million years ago, and it starts with plants like algae. Plants that have to live in the water to be able to survive. These plants are very simple plants. They just have leaf structures, and they are the most simple types of plants on our planet. As we continue on the timeline of plants, plants start to leave the water about 400 million years ago. And they come on land. And those first plants are things like mosses. And they have very shallow roots. They are very close to the ground. They don't get very tall. They don't have stem structures. And the plants have to be close to the water and pretty consistently wet. And as we continue to move on the timeline, ferns come into the timeline of plants, and there becomes more diversity of plants. They start to produce things called spores. And this fern right here has a really great example of what spores look like. So the plants before this did not produce a seed-like structure, and ferns are the first plants to do that. You can also tell that ferns can be taller, so they have stem structures, they have cells that can help them be taller. And so we've left the water. We can move a little bit further as ferns have deeper roots, and they can start to have a little bit more diversity because of the spores. We've continued down our timeline. We're somewhere around 250 million years ago, and we're looking at a plant called a conifer, or a cone-bearing plant. And so these types of plants, again, we start to see plants that are taller, plants that produce trunks and hard enough stems that they can be very tall. These plants have needles, and the reproduction has changed. So instead of spores, now we have a plant that produces seeds in a cone structure. So one of the plants that we saw on our tree tour, and one of our favorite trees in the garden, is the ginkgo tree. Ginkgos have been around for about 270 million years. They're called a living fossil, and this is kind of the bridge between the plants that produce cones, the conifers and things like that, the cycad palms and things like that, and plants that produce flowers. And so the ginkgo is kind of the in-between of those types of plants. About 60 million years ago, plants started to produce flowers. And flowers and insects created a huge boom and diversity of plants. And so most of the plants that we see outside our homes and around in the garden are plants that produce flowers. And so there's lots of different types of plants that produce flowers because of how they reproduce. So insects and wind pollination and things like that came to be about 60 million years ago.